Hello, my name is Sonia Bodnar. Welcome to Art Talks. Today we are presenting a book, Solomea, Star of Opera's Golden Age, that has been published in 2 languages. To me, this is very symbolic because the book is about Solomea Krushelnicka, who was fluent in both Ukrainian and foreign languages, and the author of the book also has Ukrainian roots. I am pleased to introduce Mr. Andriy Semotiuk, who wrote this book, is a well-known immigration lawyer and is also a descendant of the family that the book discusses. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be with you here today.
I believe that the viewers and readers will be very interested to learn how the idea of this book originated, how it was realized, and thanks to what events we now have this valuable edition in 2 languages.
Well, that's a great question to start off with. Well, I grew up in Canada, and my parents came from Ukrainian, and Solomea Krushelnicka was my great aunt, that is to say, my grandmother's sister. So during the course of my growing up, I learned about her from my family members, in particular from my mother, who also was named Solomea, and her sister, my aunt, Uliana, who lived in Los Angeles. My mother and I lived in Edmonton. But I have to admit that while I was growing up, there was not that much discussion about Solomea and her life. I just remember one poignant moment. It was when I was in approximately grade 3 and I came home from school and I was having lunch, and my mother came into the kitchen as I was sitting at the kitchen table. And she was opening a mail up, and she opened up a letter and she said, "Oh, pomerla tata Solomea." And I thought, oh, kto to je tata Solomea? Who's tata Solomea? And she said, oh, she was nasza tata I slavna spivachka, a famous singer. But that was about all. And I was very young back then. I mean, I was only about 5 years old. But that message took something like 5 years to get from Ukraine, behind the Iron Curtain, out to the West and to us, to reach us, to inform us of her death. She died in 1952. So that was the first time really I can remember even mentioning Solomea's name. Over the course of many years, occasionally I would bump into something related to her. So for example, when I was in high school, my mother encouraged me to go see an opera. It was called Madame Butterfly. And also my teachers from school encouraged me to go. And so I went. But I did not know then, until much later, I learned that she, Tata Solomea, was very instrumental in resurrecting that opera from failure at La Scala in Milan, at the greatest opera theater in the world at the time, in 1904, to worldwide success by helping Puccini restage the opera. In fact, today, this year, is the 120th anniversary of the successful restaging of that opera, largely due to Tata Solomea's intervention with Puccini and restaging the opera after his failure at La Scala. Madame Butterfly today is one of the most famous and popular operas in the world. In fact, in Toronto, it'll be on in January, staged in the Toronto Opera House. And I saw that it was staged in New York at the Metropolitan Opera House just earlier this year. So that's a little bit about how I first came into contact with them. A little bit more was I traveled to Ukraine. And in the course of my travels, I met people from the musée. There was a museum dedicated to Solomea's life. And I met women in particular from that museum who encouraged me to take an interest in her life. And in time, I realized, hold it, wait a minute. I need to write something about this famous woman. And I ended up writing this book. I'll show you. This is the Ukrainian version, Solomea. There's an English. I have the English version back.
I have the English version right here as well.
There you go. Yeah. So that's how I ended up writing the book.
And, I think writing about renowned and notable people who have entered our history and culture is always a serious responsibility, as the author has a double task of carefully collecting facts about a particular individual, in this case about Solomea Krushelnicka, and also the era in which she lived, and also to find a form of expression and presentation of the material that will captivate the reader. So what new things did you discover about Solomea Krushelnicka while preparing this edition? What impressed you the most about the life of this incredible woman who was able to conquer the world stage at the age of 25?
Yeah, well, several things. Number one, she spoke 8 languages, including English, I might add. And number two, she knew over 60 operas, both the lyrics and the music, off by heart. In fact, and when she was teaching students, she would often just launch into an area from an opera to show them what she was talking about while she was teaching them. She was a world figure in her day, which was primarily, she was at the golden age of opera. She was the leading soprano in the world. That was in the first decade of the 1900s. She lived in Italy, in Viareggio, which is a resort town not far from Milan on the western coast of Italy. And she entertained some of the top people, Puccini, Toscanini, Caruso, and others, or at least met these people and performed with them in the course of her life. She performed in all the big theaters in Europe, in North Africa, in South America, in the United States, and in Canada. In fact, she came to Canada in 1928. She performed in Montreal, she was in Toronto, and she was in Winnipeg, where she performed in Winnipeg. So these were the outstanding achievements that I learned as I studied her life.
And she must have been really dedicated to her profession, to reach those heights. And reading your book, we can see that Solomea was a very career-oriented woman and a feminist as well. Can we say that Solomea was a woman breaking traditions and making a way for a more modern way of life?
Absolutely. She was a groundbreaker. She, first of all, she was one of the first women in the world to own a car. She had a car just when the cars were invented. She traveled all over the world. I mean, very few women travel at age 25. In her 20s, she traveled all over, South America and so on. She had friendships with some top people and intellectuals, Franco, Lesya Ukrainka, and others like that. Hlynchak from Ukrainian, from Kyiv. So she had quite a following, or at least a collegial circle that she circle that she was part of. As she married the mayor of the city of Viareggio, who was a lawyer and twice elected mayor of the city of Viareggio. An incredible life in that respect, something no equal. And I'll tell you some of the key reasons why she was such an incredible person. Number one, when she was young, after some hardships in her life, her father took her to the side and said, okay, look, what do you want to do with your life? And she said, I love singing. I want to sing. And the father said, okay, if you're going to sing, we're going to send you to opera school where you're going to learn to sing. And they did. First to Lviv, the opera house in Lviv, or the opera school, and then to Milan, which was the leading place in the world for opera, where she studied under one of the great opera teachers. And then over time, she made her way into the opera world. Now, she was outstanding for a number of reasons. Number one, she was very beautiful. She was physically in great shape. She must have been a great athlete to be able to perform every night like she did. She was a great actress. She took acting and learned how to act and be in dramatic roles. It wasn't just standing there singing, but she was able to act in the course of her opera performances. Number three, because she knew the words, the languages that she was performing in, she was able to perform in French, in Italian, in Polish, for example, in Spanish, in all these languages. It was incredible that she'd be able to do that. So those were some of the factors. But I believe the key factor was that she was intensely devoted to becoming the best in the world because she loved her craft. It was something that was unique to her. She had a unique voice that enchanted the world wherever she went and sang. The voice was outstanding. You can learn about her voice. Some of her singing is recorded on YouTube. And just as an experiment, you can listen to her sing, and you can listen to Maria Callas, who is a famous current or more modern opera star, and hear them sing the same aria from Madame Butterfly. And I believe if you listen to her singing versus Maria Callas, who was a great singer, I believe her voice was more outstanding than even Maria Callas's. So those are some reasons why she was so successful.
And you mentioned how she traveled the whole world. She also lived majority of her life outside of Ukraine, but she always carried her Ukrainian heritage with her. She always cherished it. And I also read somewhere that Solomea always carried with her Kobzar by Taras Shevchenko. Why do you think this book was so dear to her?
Well, Shevchenko was dear because he was Ukraine's great poet and also an artist. One of the disappointments of her life was she was not able to perform in Kyiv. She wanted to perform in Kyiv, but it was just not possible under Tsarist Russia. And it is true, she was a great patriot. In fact, one of the things I write about in my book is the story of how she performed before Tsar Nicholas II. One day, when she was in Warsaw performing in the Polish opera, a Russian general appeared at her, dressing room, and speaking to her in French, asked, could she come with him on a train because the Tsar Nicholas II, has requested that she perform in his court in a place called Skabornici, I think. It's a town now in Poland, but back then it was part of the Russian Empire. And she was put on the spot. What do you do when the Tsar of Russia wants you to come and perform? Now, the Tsar of Russia is the symbol of anti-Ukrainian hatred. Like his ancestors, and he forbid the publishing of Ukrainian books, education in Ukrainian, songs, and so on. But she decided she would go, and she performed before the Tsar, and performed a number of arias from the opera world, and then the Tsar asked for a little more, for her to perform a little more, and she sang some Ukrainian folk songs to the Tsar. Now, this was a delight. It was a delicate slap across the face for the Tsar. And when she finished, he asked her to come to speak to him. And she came and he asked her, what language were you singing in? And she said, Ukrainian. And he said, oh, I was not aware. What's your background? Ukrainian. And he said, oh, that's not what they told me. And he politely gave her a memento, some jewelry, to thank her for coming and performing in his court. And that was it. But to be so brave to stand up and perform in Ukrainian in front of the Tsar, who was the epitome of hatred of Ukraine, it took, some courage, and she had that courage.
And Russia has always tried to either lure away famous people or destroy them in various ways. And unfortunately, Solomea also suffered from this destructive pressure at some point. So how do you think her fate might have unfolded if the Soviet system hadn't confined her when she returned from Italy?
Good question. And a little background. As the World War II was starting, just before it started, Solomea made a trip to Ukraine, back to Lviv, not knowing that World War II was about to erupt. And just as she arrived in the Karpaty, World War II broke out on September 1st, 1939. Soon, the Iron Curtain fell, and she would be trapped behind that Iron Curtain for the rest of her life. She was unable to break loose, although she had a villa in Italy and friendships, including, for example, Arturo Toscanini, who eventually immigrated to the United States and became the conductor of the NBC symphony in New York, and others, Rufo and other singers, Caruso and others, who were able to continue on in Western Europe, whereas in her case she was locked in behind the Iron Curtain and unable to leave. And they took away her Italian passport, made her commit to a Soviet passport in order to make a living. And she lost her villa in Italy. It was broken into, and everything, all her goods and everything, her collection of like costumes and letters and everything like that was all lost during the war. When actually what happened was a bomb fell near her villa and broke down one of the walls in her villa, and it was plundered. The villa was plundered, so there was nothing left. But nonetheless, she had the villa, and she could have returned to the villa and lived in Italy. But because of the Iron Curtain and the situation, the Soviet Union never let her out. And she ended up dying in the Soviet Union in 1952.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Pane Andriyu, I hope that our conversation got our viewers interested, and I hope they would like to come to the book presentation. So can you tell our viewers a bit more about the book presentation happening at КУМФ Gallery on October 27? What is the event plan, and will visitors have a chance to buy your book and get it signed?
Sure. Well, in particular, I'm showing on that day the Ukrainian version of the book and talking about the Ukrainian version. There will be some guests there, a performance, musical performance, which will be like I attended the rehearsal, and it's outstanding. And I'm hoping that there might be surprise guests from Ukrainian that will be there. As for the books, my books are available on Amazon. You can buy the book in English or in Ukrainian on Amazon. Also, there's a recorded version, audio recorded version of the book on Amazon. And I will have a few books available for anybody who might be interested in buying there. So I'm very much looking forward to spending some time with people there. I want to tell them the story of Madame Butterfly in particular, the full story, and more about her life, hopefully with some insights into her life that may be of interest to the people who come.
So again, dear viewers, we hope we got you interested and you will come for the book presentation at КУМФ Gallery on October 27. And Pane Andriyu, thank you very much for this interesting and insightful book about Solomea Krushelnitska in 2 languages. And thank you for promoting our Ukrainian culture and history, for preserving the memory of Solomea Krushelnitska, and for keeping the memory of your family here in Canada.
Thank you so much for having me on your program. It was a delight to be with you as your guest. You're a wonderful host. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this conversation.
Bye-bye.